Reading my wife's emails could land me in prison. It's a strange thing when you realize your life has split into two parts. Before and after. For most people, that moment is a wedding, the birth of a kid, or some tragedy. For me, it was an email. And it wasn't even an email to me. It was one I was never supposed to see. A digital whisper that ended up screaming louder than anything I'd ever heard. It confirmed a secret I was terrified to know but also desperate to prove. And for a minute, just holding that proof felt like a victory. Felt like justice. But that feeling didn't last. In the quiet, sterile conference room of a divorce lawyer's office, that feeling of victory curdled into pure terror. Because it turns out the truth isn't always enough. Sometimes how you get it is the only thing that matters. I always thought that catching my wife cheating would be the worst day of my life. I was wrong. The worst day was when my own lawyer told me that the proof I found, the emails that laid it all out, could send me to prison for 5 years. All of a sudden, the affair was the second biggest problem I had. The guy I was paying to help me end my marriage was now explaining, in painful detail, how I had handed my wife the perfect weapon to destroy me. Not just in divorce court, but in criminal court, too. I walked in there feeling like a victim, looking for a shield. I walked out a potential felon, looking at a prison sentence. And I had nobody to blame but myself. It doesn't start with a bang. It's nothing like the movies. It's more like a slow leak, a gradual cooling. For me and Sarah, it started with silence. We'd been married for 12 years. And for the first 10, our house was just filled with noise. Laughter, stupid arguments about what to watch, the constant back and forth of two people building a life. We talked about everything. Our days, our dreams, the dumb things our friends did. Her telling me about office drama. Me complaining about my commute. It was the background noise of a happy marriage. And then, the noise started to fade. It began with her phone. It was subtle. The phone used to just live on the kitchen counter, screen up. Now, it was always in her pocket or flipped over on the nightstand. When a text came in, she wouldn't just glance at it anymore. She'd turn away, her shoulders hunched up, creating this little private bubble around her and the screen. I told myself it was nothing. I was just being paranoid. And who wants to be that guy? The jealous, suspicious husband. So I ignored it. But the little things started to pile up, like loose change in your pocket that eventually gets really heavy. The late nights at the office became more and more frequent. First, I was proud of her. She was killing it at her marketing job, getting more responsibility. I'd have dinner waiting, and she'd come home exhausted but buzzing and tell me about the big project. But then the stories got vague. Just a lot of work, she'd say, kissing me on the cheek before heading right for the shower. The details just vanished. The intimacy, both emotional and physical, started to wither. Our conversations became purely transactional. Did you pick up the dry cleaning? We're out of milk. That easy, comfortable silence we used to have was replaced by this tense, heavy quiet that felt like an accusation. When I tried to talk about it, to ask if she was okay, she'd get defensive. I'm just tired, Mark. Work is stressful. It was a brick wall, and every time I tried to get over it, it just felt like it got higher. I felt like I was losing my mind. Was I making it all up? Was I the problem? I started replaying every conversation, every little interaction, searching for clues. I became a detective in my own home and a stranger in my own marriage. The person I trusted more than anyone in the world was starting to feel like someone I didn't even know. Then came the weird financial stuff. I've always handled our joint finances, not in a controlling way just because I'm a numbers guy and she hated doing it. I started noticing charges on our shared credit card that just felt off. Dinners at expensive restaurants on nights she was supposedly working late. A hotel bar tab from across town. When I asked her about one of the dinners, she just waved it off. Oh, that was a client dinner. I forgot the corporate card. It was plausible. Plausible enough that I could make myself believe it. But that seed of doubt was planted, and it was starting to grow. I remember the exact moment the suspicion became a certainty. It was a Tuesday. She told me she was going to a yoga class after work with her friend, Jessica. Around 8 p.m., Jessica texted me a picture of her new puppy. We texted for a minute, and I casually asked, How was yoga with Sarah? Her reply came a few seconds later. Yoga? We didn't go to yoga tonight. I had to work late. Is everything okay? Time just stopped. The air in the room felt thick. I read the text again, and there it was. A simple, undeniable lie. Not a misunderstanding. Not a miscommunication. A deliberate, calculated lie. She wasn't at yoga. She wasn't with Jessica. So, where was she? When she came home an hour later, smelling faintly of a perfume that wasn't hers, she was all smiles. Yoga was amazing, she said, stretching. I really needed that. I just stared at her, my heart pounding in my chest, and this cold, terrifying calm washed over me. The guy who was afraid of being the paranoid husband? He was gone. In his place was a man who knew, with sickening certainty, that his life was a lie. I didn't have the whole truth, but I knew I'd been lied to. And in that moment, I knew I had to find out why. The question wasn't if she was hiding something anymore. It was what she was hiding, and how I was going to prove it. Deciding to cross that line from being suspicious to actually investigating your spouse. It's a dark choice. It feels like a betrayal in itself. You're violating the very trust your marriage is supposed to be built on, even if you're pretty sure that trust is already shattered. For days, I wrestled with it. I told myself to just confront her, to lay it all out, the lies about work, the weird credit card charges, the text from Jessica. But I knew exactly what she'd do. She'd deny it. She'd twist it, call me crazy, controlling, paranoid. And without proof, what did I have? Just a feeling. A horrible, gut-wrenching feeling. And a feeling isn't enough to end a 12-year marriage. I needed something solid. Something she couldn't deny. It all started with our shared computer. It was the family desktop, a big iMac in the corner of our home office. We both used it, but her email was almost always logged in. In all our years together, passwords weren't really a secret. We had a list in a drawer with passwords for Netflix, utilities, stuff like that. Her email password wasn't on the list, but I'd seen her type it in 100 times. It was her childhood dog's name and the year she was born. It was a password from a time when we had no secrets. One night, she fell asleep on the couch. I walked into the office, my hands literally trembling. I sat down, and the screen glowed in the dark room. The Gmail login page was up. I typed in her email address. Then I moved the cursor to the password field. My heart was pounding against my ribs. This was it. The point of no return. Part of me was screaming to just stop, get up, and go to bed. Pretend none of this was happening. But the part of me that had to know the truth, the part that couldn't live in this fog anymore, that part was stronger. I typed in the password. Click. Access granted. I felt this jolt, a mix of shame and adrenaline. I was in. Her inbox loaded. A sea of promotions and junk mail. For a second, I actually felt relieved. Maybe I was wrong. I started scrolling, my eyes scanning the subject lines. Work stuff. An Amazon confirmation. A message from her mom. Nothing. Then I saw the search bar. My mind raced. What do I even look for? I didn't have a name. I tried searching for words. Love. Miss you. Can't wait. The results were useless. Old emails from me, song lyrics from years ago, spam. Total dead end. I clicked on her sent folder. I scrolled down past all the work emails and messages to her friends. And then I saw it. A thread with a name I didn't recognize. David. The subject line was Project Update. I clicked it. It was a short, professional-looking email. A few lines about a marketing campaign. Nothing. But there were replies. I opened the whole thread. The first few emails really were about a project. But as I scrolled, the tone started to shift. The professional sign-offs were replaced with just a D. The formal language softened. Great work today became, you were amazing today. And then, I found the email that changed everything. It was from her to him, sent 2 weeks ago, on a night she told me she was working late. I can't stop thinking about last night. It read, I know this is crazy, but I feel more alive with you than I have in years. I just wish we didn't have to hide. The words went blurry. Couldn't breathe. It was a physical blow. I literally felt the air leave my lungs, like I'd been punched in the gut. I read it again, and again, like the words might change. They didn't. The screen in front of me was the digital tombstone of my marriage. I kept digging. I wasn't a hesitant husband anymore. I was just digging through the ruins of my own life. I found dozens more emails. Plans for secret lunches. Compliments that were so intimate it hurt to read them. They talked about their future, a future without me. He was a coworker, someone she'd mentioned maybe once or twice. It had been going on for 6 months. The worst part was the detail. They weren't just having an affair. They were building a life together. They had inside jokes. They recommended books to each other. They talked about me, my habits, my schedule as an obstacle. I was a problem to be managed. A piece of old furniture in their way. The devastation was absolute. But underneath it was this cold, hard feeling of vindication. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I was right. I had this overwhelming urge to print them, to have physical proof. I didn't know what I'd do with them, but I needed them. I selected the most incriminating emails, the ones with specific dates, the ones that talked about their physical relationship, the ones that talked about her plans for leaving me. I hit print. The printer whirring to life in the silent house sounded like a scream. I grabbed the warm pages from the tray. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold them. This was my proof. This was my leverage. This, I thought, was the weapon that would protect me. I was so focused on the betrayal, on the pain, on the undeniable evidence in my hands. It never once occurred to me to think about the legality of what I had just done. I had found the truth by breaking down a door I was never supposed to open. And that was a mistake that would end up costing me way more than just my marriage. I walked into that first meeting with my divorce lawyer feeling like I was holding a royal flush. I was hurt, obviously, but I was also armed. I had a folder full of printed emails, a timeline of the lies, and the cold, hard certainty that I was in the right. The affair was bad enough, but I'd also discovered she was using our joint accounts to pay for it. I figured this would be a painful but straightforward process. I had the proof. A judge would see what she did, and the divorce would reflect her betrayal. My lawyer, Mr. Harrison, was exactly what you'd picture. Gray hair, sharp suit, an office that smelled like old books and quiet confidence. He listened patiently as I laid out the whole story, my voice cracking a few times. I told him about the late nights, the distance, and then the final discovery. I pushed the folder across his big mahogany desk. Here, I said, with a grim sense of satisfaction. This is everything. Proof of the affair, proof she was lying about money. It's all there. He opened the folder and started reading. I was waiting for him to nod, to look up at me with sympathetic eyes and say, "Well, this certainly makes things clear." Instead, his expression just got tight. He read a few pages, put them down, and looked at me over his glasses. His first question wasn't about the affair. It wasn't about the money. "Mark," he said slowly, his tone shifting from therapist to serious lawyer. "How exactly did you get these emails?" I hesitated. They're from her email account, on our home computer. "Did she give you the password?" he asked. Not for this, no," I admitted. "But I knew it. We lived together. It was the family computer." Harrison leaned back in his chair and just sighed. It was this long, tired sound that sucked all the air out of the room. He steepled his fingers and looked right at me. "Mark, we have a problem. A very serious one." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "It's proof." "It's proof," he agreed. "But it's also fruit of the poisonous tree. Evidence you get illegally usually isn't admissible in court. But that's not even our biggest issue. The bigger issue is that you may have committed a federal crime." The words just didn't compute. "A crime? Me? I was the victim here." "That's insane," I stammered. "She cheated on me. I just found the proof." He picked up a pen. "It's not insane, Mark. It's the law. 2 laws, specifically, that you need to understand right now." And that's when my real education began. "First," he said, "there's the Stored Communications Act, or SCA. It's part of a bigger federal law, the Electronic Communications Privacy Act, or ECPA. He explained that the SCA makes it illegal to intentionally access stored electronic communications without authorization. Think of a password-protected email account like a locked filing cabinet, he said. Even if that cabinet is in a house you share, you can't legally pick the lock. Her Gmail account, since it was protected by a password she didn't give you for this purpose, is considered a private, protected facility. By logging in as her, you intentionally accessed without authorization. I felt sick. But we were married. It was a shared computer. The law doesn't have a spousal exception, he said bluntly. Courts have consistently ruled that marriage doesn't give you a free pass to snoop. There was a famous case in Michigan, a guy named Leon Walker who was charged with a felony for doing almost exactly what you did. Logged into his wife's Gmail on a shared computer, suspected an affair. He found proof, but he ended up facing 5 years in prison. The charges were eventually dropped, but not before he went through absolute hell. My mouth was bone dry. Felony. 5 years. The words were just echoing in my head. And Harrison wasn't done. Second, there's the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, the CFAA, he continued. It's an anti-hacking law. It bans accessing a protected computer without authorization to get information. Any computer connected to the internet, like your iMac, counts as a protected computer. Again, because you weren't authorized to access her private account, you could be on the hook for violating this too. He let that sink in. The folder of emails, my royal flush, suddenly looked like a ticking bomb on his desk. So what does this mean? I finally whispered. It means, Harrison said, choosing his words carefully, that this evidence is almost certainly useless in our divorce case. If I try to introduce these emails, her lawyer will immediately ask how you got them, and the judge will throw them out. Worse, it destroys your credibility. You go from being the sympathetic, wronged husband to the guy who illegally spied on his wife. It can hurt you in how assets are divided, and if you had kids, it would be a nightmare in a custody fight. He paused, then delivered the final blow. But the absolute worst-case scenario is she decides to push it. She could sue you civilly for invasion of privacy. Or, and this is the nightmare scenario, her lawyer could report this to the DA, and you could face a criminal investigation. The ECPA carries penalties of up to 5 years in prison and massive fines. I just sat there, stunned. My entire story was rewritten in 10 minutes. I wasn't the good guy who uncovered a villain's plot. I was the fool who broke the law doing it. The betrayal I felt from Sarah's affair was suddenly dwarfed by this new betrayal from my own ignorance. I was so focused on her lies that I had walked straight into a legal minefield. I wanted to expose her secret world. Instead, I gave her a new secret, one about me that was far more dangerous. The emails weren't my shield anymore. They were her sword, and it was pointed directly at my throat. Leaving Harrison's office was like stepping into a different reality. The city looked the same, but my place in it had completely changed. I wasn't just a guy getting a divorce. I was a guy living under the shadow of a felony charge. Every single day was an exercise in anxiety. I was fighting a war on 2 fronts and losing on both. The first front was the divorce. The confrontation with Sarah was nothing like I'd imagined. When I finally told her, I know about David, I didn't have that righteous anger I thought I would. My anger was just hollowed out by fear. I couldn't throw the printed emails down on the table. They were my liability. The look on her face wasn't shame. It was a flicker of panic that was quickly replaced by a cold, calculating hardness. She'd already talked to a lawyer. She knew. She knew what I'd done, and she knew the power it gave her. Our divorce became this surreal game of hypocrisy. Her lawyer painted me as controlling, paranoid, and unstable. My actions were framed as the ultimate betrayal, way worse than her 6-month affair. The affair itself? Barely mentioned. It was a no-fault state, so her cheating was legally irrelevant, they argued. But my computer misuse? Oh, that was very relevant. It spoke to my character. My credibility was gone. Every negotiation was poisoned by the unspoken threat. Push too hard, and we'll talk to the district attorney. It was legal blackmail. I wanted justice. I got a lesson in leverage. And she had all of it. The second front was the constant, low-level terror. I lived in a state of what if? What if the police show up at my door? What if I get a summons? I found myself looking over my shoulder. My heart would pound every time the phone rang with an unknown number. The penalties Harrison mentioned, fines, prison, just played on a loop in my head. Sleep was a joke. It was a psychological prison, long before a real one was even a possibility. The irony was just suffocating. I was the one who was cheated on, lied to, and abandoned. But in the eyes of the law, I was the one who crossed the line. The very act of finding the truth had made me the bad guy. I got obsessed, spending hours online reading about the ECPA and CFAA, just torturing myself with stories of people who made the same stupid mistake. I learned that this idea of privacy within a marriage is basically a myth, legally speaking. I learned that consent is everything, and sharing a Netflix password years ago doesn't give you a free pass to read private emails when things go south. Slowly, painfully, Harrison and I changed our strategy. We had to. The emails were locked away, useless. We rebuilt the case from scratch the right way. This is the boring part they don't show you in the movies. We used the official discovery process to request documents. We issued subpoenas for financial records directly from the banks. We hired a forensic accountant to trace the money. It was slow, expensive, and so frustrating. It felt like trying to prove it's raining without being allowed to point out the window. But it was the only path. We got the credit card statements which showed the patterns. We deposed her under oath. And while she was coached to be vague, the lies started to show cracks. The legal process, slow as it is, started to work. It wasn't the slam dunk I'd wanted, but it was something. It was a case built on solid ground, not on the toxic soil of illegal snooping. The divorce is final now. I didn't get that righteous justice I was looking for. I lost more of our assets than I think I should have. I settled for less because that threat of criminal charges never really went away. It's a bitter pill to swallow. She was never really held accountable for the affair in a court of law. And I was constantly held accountable for how I found out about it. The criminal charges never came. It was just a threat, a powerful bargaining chip that she used perfectly. But the emotional toll of living with that fear for over a year has been huge. It's changed me. Looking back, I get it. The emotional impulse to find the truth, no matter the cost, is so powerful. When you feel that kind of betrayal, your world is upside down, and you'll do anything to feel solid ground again. But my story is a cautionary tale. That need for instant justice can lead you down a path that causes way more harm, not just to your case but to your own freedom. So if you are in a situation like I was, if you suspect your partner is cheating or hiding something, please don't make the same mistake I did. The single most important thing you can do is talk to a lawyer before you do anything. Before you check a phone. Before you guess a password. Before you install any software. The law is complicated, and I didn't know is not a defense. There are legal ways to get the evidence you need. The slower, it's more frustrating, but it won't put you at risk of going to prison. Protect yourself first. Your need for immediate proof is not worth 5 years of your life. Let me know what you think in the comments. It's a tough situation, and it can help to talk about it. My life is quiet now. The two-front war is over. I live in a smaller apartment, and the silence that felt so heavy in my marriage now feels, on most days, like peace. I didn't get the ending I wanted, but I survived. And I'm definitely wiser. I learned, in the hardest way possible, that the legal system is not a court of morality. It's a system of rules. And breaking those rules, even when you feel like you have every right to, carries a heavy price. That folder of printed emails is in a box in the back of my closet. I've thought about throwing them out 100 times, but I can't. They're not proof of her betrayal anymore. They're a reminder of my own catastrophic mistake. They remind me that the truth is powerful, but it doesn't justify everything. Discovering my wife's affair broke my heart, but discovering my own potential crime almost broke my entire life. I'm still rebuilding, but this time I know the foundation is solid. And this time I'm checking every single brick.